In early 2020, the global aviation industry didn't just slow down, it evaporated overnight. For AirAsia X, the pioneer of low-cost, long-haul travel, the closure of international borders was an existential threat. Almost immediately, the airline's revenue dropped to zero, but the bills did not stop. Within months, a staggering 60 billion ringgit plus debt mountain threatened to bury the company forever. This is not just a story about a pandemic. This is the story of the most ambitious, aggressive, and controversial corporate rescue in Malaysian legal history. Welcome to the anatomy of a restructuring.
In 2020, the aviation industry faced a major crisis which caused travel bans and border closures. This resulted in AirAsia facing severe financial losses.
By understanding AirAsia X business model, we can know why this crisis caused a major impact. Even though it's a low-cost airline, it was able to sustain because of its high number of passengers with continuous travel demand, believing anyone can fly internationally with their affordable flight tickets. However, the crisis changed everything. When traveling was banned and the borders were closed, the business model became unstable and legal issues started. Under Section 2H of the Contracts Act 1950, a contract is defined as an agreement enforceable by law. The flight tickets advertised by AirAsia X are known as invitation to treat. They are inviting customers to make an offer, and if a customer is interested to make a payment, it becomes an offer, and once the airline confirms the booking, it is acceptance. Upon booking confirmation, a contract is only formed. Due to the pandemic and government having to impose regulations, it was impossible for AirAsia X to meet the contractual obligations between their customers at that point of time. Under Section 57(2) of the Contracts Act 1950, it is known as frustration of contract as the overall situation was unexpected and it was impossible to meet the contractual obligations. As a result, the contract terminated automatically. The contract was terminated. The crisis affected about 270,000 passengers who could not use their flight tickets, and many suppliers suffered losses and had no guarantee to recover their money. It was impossible to fulfill the contractual obligations due to the pandemic. This caused serious financial issues for AirAsia X and all the people affected. In conclusion, AirAsia X business model led to the frustration of contracts. However, due to the unforeseen circumstances caused by the pandemic, it resulted in frustration and it was impossible to fulfill the obligations and financial consequences affecting many people.
To navigate RM's 64.1 billion financial crisis, the airline utilized the protective framework of Section 366 to pause the creditor's claim and restructured its obligations. In the shadows of RM's 64.15 billion debt crisis, AirAsia X, instead of surrendering the company, it reached out for one of the most powerful legal weapons in Malaysian company law under the Section 366 of the Companies Act 2016. This is the story of the debt shield that saved the national icon. The heart of this protection lies in the principle established more than 120 years ago in the landmark English case of Salomon versus Salomon and Company Limited. The House of Lords ruled that once a company is properly incorporated, it becomes a completely separate legal entity which is distinct from its shareholders and founders, means the owners are not personally liable for the company's financial debts. As for AirAsia X, this was critical even though the debt reached out RM 64.15 billion, the founders and the directors were shielded. The liability belongs only to the company itself, not to the owners or any individuals. Restructuring such an enormous debt without going bankrupt typically follows a four-stage process. First, an application to court to convene meetings.
Second, the issue of the restraining order under Section 368 to stop all legal proceedings. Third, the creditor votings where the 75% in value rule is tested. And finally, the fourth stage, the court sanction which makes the plan law. Once sanctioned, it becomes legally binding on everyone, even those who voted against, and this is known as the cram down principle. By grouping creditors into carefully defined groups, AirAsia X proposed 99.9 haircut, reducing 64.15 billion to just Rm 200 million. On 16 December 2021, the High Court of Malaya gave its final approval. Comparatively, Sapura Energy Berhad utilized similar orders to manage Rm 10.8 billion in debt, unlike the government bailout of the Malaysian Airlines. AirAsia X and Sapura demonstrate a market-driven rescue where the creditors and not taxpayers bear the primary loss. This case study not only focused on financial rescue, and it was a legal masterstroke under the Section 366 when the ultimate debt shield protecting jobs, the brand and the future low-cost long-haul travel in Malaysia. AirAsia X proved that even in the darkest crisis, Malaysian company law provides a clear and structured path to rebirth.
This stunning legal victory in the courtroom created a profound ethical dilemmas in the public square. Under Section 366, a 99.9% haircut was imposed on the debts.
Let's put that into the perspective. If a family paid 5,000 for the holiday to India, later found the flight is cancelled due of COVID pandemics, and AirAsia X planned to refund their payment in the terms of restructuring scheme. The restructuring means the airline was legally obligated to return only like 5 ringgits. And even though repayment was often offering in the form of travelling voucher or travelling credits, not a cash. From the legal standpoint, this was justified. Under extraordinary circumstances, the doctrines of frustrations allowed the company to avoid the liabilities. And the pandemic made it impossible to perform a contractual obligations. Under a normal conditions, consumer protection principle and regulatory like MAFCON strictly prohibits business from accepting payment without delivering a service. However, in this case, those protections were effectively overridden by the insolvency law and a court approval restructuring scheme. And what is the true ethicals from this case? On one hand, the restructuring saved over 2,000 jobs and preserved for key national airlines to hundreds of thousands of ordinary consumers. Passengers did not just losing money, they are losing hope on AirAsia X. In another hand, it shifts a financial burden many lost once in the life experience. From a corporate social responsibility perspective, companies are expecting to act not only within the law, but it must be a fair and accountability. It is a textbook clash between the legal compliance and the ethical responsibility. Yet this case is revealed harsh reality to the consumers. In the time of crisis COVID pandemics, the law often prioritizes the corporate civil over the consumer's justice.
While the passenger outrage was loud, the fiercest battle for AAX's survival wasn't fought against consumers, it was fought against global financial titans. In the landmark case AirAsia X Berhad versus BOC Aviation Limited and Oars, a group of 15 powerful global aircraft lessors intervened in the High Court. They argued that Malaysia's Companies Act could not override international law. They pointed to the Cape Town Convention, an international treaty designed to protect aircraft lessors, which Malaysia had enacted into local law in 2006. The lessors argued that under the CTC, A debtor cannot modify aircraft leases during an insolvency event without the creditor's explicit consent. They demanded their planes back and full payment. The tension was palpable. If the lessors won, AAX would lose its fleet and face immediate liquidation. But High Court Justice Ong Chi Kwan delivered a masterstroke ruling. He determined that because AirAsia X's scheme proposed the complete termination of the leases, rather than trying to modify active ongoing leases, the scheme did not violate the Cape Town Convention. The lessors were left with their standard remedy, sue for damages for the breach of contract. And those damages, they were immediately lumped into the 64 billion ringgit debt pile and subjected to the 99.9% cram-down. Simultaneously, we must look at the directors. Under Section 2131 of the Companies Act 2016, directors have a strict fiduciary duty to act in good faith and in the best interest of the company. By pushing this aggressive, arguably ruthless restructuring against international lessors, the directors were fulfilling their legal obligation to keep the company alive.
In the wake of the global pandemic, the aviation industry faced two choices, which is liquidation or restructuring. While carriers like Thai Airways or Norwegian Air struggle with bankruptcy protection and forced debt to equity swaps, AirAsia X leveraged Malaysian Section 366 of the Company Act 2016. Why was Section 366 the most recommended? In a traditional winding up, assets are distributed in a strict order of priority. Secured creditors and liquidators are paid first, leaving unsecured creditors, including travel agents and passengers, at the absolute bottom with virtually zero recovery. For AirAsia X, facing 64.15 billion ringgit in liabilities, winding up was a death sentence for all stakeholders. The case has now become a global case study because it successfully challenged international legal norms. AirAsia X successfully argued for the rejection of the Gibbs Rule, which is a traditional English law principle that usually prevents foreign courts from discharging English law debts. Furthermore, it provided the world's first detailed analysis of Article 10 of the Cape Town Convention. The court ruled that while the scheme was an insolvency-related event, it did not require the lessor's consent for a cram-down as long as the underlying lease were terminated. By prioritizing business efficiency over rigid contractual claims, AirAsia X didn't just survive, it benchmarked a new path for global aviation law. Under Section 366 of the Companies Act 2016, Judicial Commissioner Ong Chi Kwan sanctioned a radical compromise. The evidence showed that AirAsia X thought technically insolvent was not hopelessly insolvent if it could reset its cost base. The court-approved scheme divided creditors into three strategic classes, which is Class A for critical entities like Malaysian airports, Class B for lessors and passengers, and a separate class for Airbus. While creditors accepted a 99.7% to 99.9% haircut, the scheme guaranteed a 0.5% cash recovery plus potential profit sharing than the 0-cent return guaranteed by liquidation.
As the sun rises on a new chapter, AirAsia X began its journey of recovery. After going through one of the most aggressive restructuring in Malaysia, the company successfully exited PN17 status, a classification by Bursa Malaysia for financially distressed companies.
But reducing debt was only the first step. AirAsia X still had major accumulated losses. To deal with this, the company reduced its share capital by 90% under the Companies Act 2016. Malaysia helping offset 1.38 billion ringgit in losses. Issued new shares to raise fresh capital, allowing the business to recover and move forward. AirAsia X also became part of the wider capital ecosystem, creating a stronger and more integrated business model. Everyday consumer had very limited protection. However, this case also shows a gap in the law. While large corporate creditors had strong bargaining power. This is why a passenger protection amendment is needed to better protect consumers who pay in advance and ensure they are treated more fairly in future.
We've examined the contracts, the company law, the international treaties, and the financial survival tactics. To conclude our documentary, we leave you with this final question. Was this legal victory a loss for consumer ethics?
It was legally necessary to save the company, but it dealt with a massive blow to long-term consumer trust in the aviation sector.
It proved that in corporate law, the survival of the entity often requires legally sacrificing the minority.
It highlights the harsh reality that statutory law is designed to protect the business mechanism first, and the individual consumer is second.
While it feels unfair without the legal mechanism, there will be no airline today and still zero compensation for anyone.
It's a vital wake-up call that our Companies Act requires modernization to include stronger, ring-fenced consumer safeguards.
The laws saved the airline, but the debate over the cost of that survival will continue. Thank you for watching.